6 months, the toxicologist said, sliding the lab report across her desk. That's roughly how long a substance like this needs to build up in someone's system to explain results like yours. I stared at the numbers on the page, numbers that had no business being inside a healthy 41-year-old woman's blood, and thought about every cup of tea my husband had made me every single night for the past half year. Always the same mug, always insisting I drink it before bed to help me sleep. I hadn't told Daniel I was getting tested. I hadn't told him about the headaches either, or the memory lapses in board meetings that had started making people whisper about whether I was still fit to run the company I'd built from nothing. I only found out by accident, because I'd been away on a business trip for 11 days and, for the first time in months, felt completely like myself again. Welcome to Revenge Stories Narrated, where family betrayal meets inevitable justice, and karma always collects its debt. My name is Elena. I'm 41. I founded a logistics software company 12 years ago, built it up from 3 employees working out of my garage to a company now worth close to $9 million. 6 years ago, I married Daniel, who joined the company not long after as chief operating officer, a role I gave him because I trusted him completely and because he was genuinely good at the job, at least in the beginning. Investors liked him. Employees respected him. For a long time, I thought I'd built the kind of partnership other people only talked about. I didn't know, until that lab report, that somewhere over the past year, Daniel had stopped being satisfied with running the operations of a company he didn't fully own and had started quietly planning how to take control of the 30% stake I still held that he didn't. It started small enough that I never noticed the pattern. About 8 months ago, I began waking up with headaches that lingered most of the morning. I mentioned it to Daniel, who suggested gently that I was probably just overworked. "You've been under a lot of stress," he said, making me tea that night, the same chamomile blend he'd started making every evening around then, always insisting I drink the whole mug before bed, telling me it would help me sleep through the pain. 2 months after that, the fatigue got worse. I started forgetting small things during the day, a client's name mid-call, a meeting time I confirmed myself that same morning. Daniel started sitting in on more of my calls, just to help, he said, and I let him, since I genuinely felt like I needed the support, and since he'd always been good at reading a room when I couldn't. I lost real ground during those months, ground I didn't realize I was losing at the time. I missed a major contract renewal because I forgot to follow up, something that had never happened to me in 12 years of running the company. I dropped nearly 10 pounds without trying, something my doctor initially chalked up to stress. Our board chair, a longtime friend named Robert, pulled me aside after a meeting in March and said, carefully, "Elena, some of the board has noticed you seem off lately. Daniel mentioned it too. He's worried about you." I didn't know then that Daniel had been the one raising it in private conversations before Robert ever said a word to me directly, planting the same concern in 3 different board members over the course of a single month. 3 weeks before that trip, Daniel brought home paperwork from our estate lawyer, a standard-looking power of attorney update. "Just in case anything ever happens," he said, "in case my health kept declining the way it had been." I nearly signed it that same week, sitting at our kitchen table while he made that same tea, telling me it was simply responsible planning for 2 people who loved each other. If you've ever had someone quietly convince the people around you that something was wrong with you, before you understood what was actually happening, tell me in the comments, because I want to know I'm not the only one who's lived through that. The trip that changed everything was an 11-day product launch in Austin, somewhere I stayed in company housing, ate hotel food, and drank nothing but bottled water and hotel coffee, since I never fully trusted hotel tap water anyway. By day 4, the headaches were gone. By day 7, my memory felt sharper than it had in months, sharp enough that I noticed it myself during a client call and actually said so out loud to my assistant. By day 11, closing out the trip in a final client meeting, I realized I hadn't felt this clear-headed in almost a year. I came home Sunday night. Daniel greeted me with a hug and, within 20 minutes, a fresh cup of chamomile tea. "To help you settle back in," he said. I didn't drink it. I told him I was too tired and went straight to bed, and that night, lying awake, I started doing the math in my head, matching every bad week to every night I'd had that same tea, and every good stretch to every trip where I hadn't. I didn't confront him the next morning. I told him I had an early meeting and drove instead to a private lab 2 towns over, where I paid out of pocket for a full toxicology panel, telling the technician only that I'd been feeling unwell and wanted answers. The results came back 9 days later. Elevated levels of a substance the toxicologist described only as something with no place in a healthy person's system, the kind of thing that builds up slowly enough to look like ordinary illness for a long time before anyone thinks to test for it. Could this have come from food or the environment accidentally? I asked her. At this level, over this length of time, she said, accidental exposure this consistent would be extremely unusual. This looks deliberate. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time before I could make myself drive home. I didn't tell Daniel what I knew. Instead, I made quiet changes to my own life without explaining any of them. I stopped drinking anything he made me, telling him I'd started intermittent fasting in the evenings for my health. I switched to sealed, store-bought water bottles I opened myself and started eating lunch out with a friend most days instead of the meals Daniel had been packing for me each morning since you never have time. Within 3 weeks, the headaches were gone completely. My memory sharpened enough that I caught 2 scheduling errors in a single week that I would have missed months earlier. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in nearly a year, and I gained back 4 of the pounds I'd lost without ever mentioning to Daniel that I'd noticed the weight was gone in the first place. Daniel noticed the change too, and it seemed to unsettle him more than reassure him. "You seem better," he said one night, watching me finish dinner I'd cooked myself, untouched tea cooling on the counter beside me. "I feel better," I said, and left it there. I hired a private investigator, a former county detective named Marcus Webb, who spent 3 weeks quietly tracing purchases on a credit card Daniel thought I never checked. A hardware and industrial supply order, made 8 months earlier, for a substance more commonly used in old plumbing systems than anywhere near a kitchen. The same week, an email to our estate lawyer requesting the exact language needed for a power of attorney to transfer decision-making authority over incapacitated shareholders in our company's founding agreement. He hadn't just been hoping I'd get sick. He'd been building the paperwork to take my company the moment I did. I didn't confront him yet. I handed everything to a lawyer of my own, a sharp litigator named Renee Castillo, along with a toxicology report and the purchase records Marcus had traced, and let her quietly build the case while I kept living exactly as I had been, healthy and steady and giving Daniel no reason to suspect anything had changed on my end beyond simple good luck. 6 weeks later, I invited Daniel to a meeting he thought was about quarterly numbers, in a conference room with Robert and Renee already seated at the table. "I wanted to talk about my health," I said, sliding the toxicology report across the table. "Since you've been so worried about it." Daniel's face went the color of the report itself. The rest moved quickly once it started. Renee laid out the lab results, the purchase history, the timeline of every symptom matched against every night I'd had that tea, and the draft power of attorney document requesting authority the moment I was declared incapacitated. Robert, visibly shaken, confirmed that Daniel had been the one quietly raising concerns about my mental state to the board for months, meeting after meeting, always framed as concern, never once as anything else. The county attorney's office opened a criminal investigation within days of Renee filing our findings. Daniel was charged with attempted poisoning, a felony in our state, along with an unrelated fraud charge once investigators found he'd forged my signature on an early draft of the power of attorney months before I ever saw the real version. Our company's own shareholder agreement, one Daniel had helped draft himself years earlier as chief operating officer, included a clause automatically forfeiting an owner's stake upon conviction of a felony committed against another shareholder. He'd written a rule that ended up costing him everything he tried to take. The same plan Daniel built to quietly take control of my company by making me sick ended up handing me full, unquestioned control of it instead, the moment his own signature on his own clause worked against him. I run the company alone now, healthier than I've been in years. Robert stayed on as board chair, and he checks in with me personally now, not because anyone whispers about my health anymore, but because he still feels guilty for ever doubting me in the first place. I hired a new operations director, a woman named Priya Nair, who runs things with a transparency Daniel never had, and revenue has climbed steadily every quarter since. Daniel is currently awaiting trial. His mother visits me sometimes, still in shock, still asking how none of us saw it sooner. I tell her the truth. I didn't see it either, not until I accidentally spent 11 days away from the one thing that was slowly making me sick. If you've ever had to quietly protect yourself before you understood exactly what you were protecting yourself from, you already know it works better that way. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and tell me down below what you would have done the moment you saw that lab report.